to have what I'm going to call a really important conversation. But first, I'm going to apologize in advance because if my 4-year-old busts in the room, which could happen at any moment, it's just going to be part of it, because I know a lot of you who have kids and stuff at home just know the reality right now that most of them aren't in school and so forth. But we just got back from a nice self-isolating camping trip, so I'm feeling somewhat refreshed. And so this is a very important conversation that I'm excited to have today, and one that not only helps us achieve our goal as production sound mixers, but one that continues to shape how our role is perceived or seen in the film industry as a whole. And in speaking about directors, I would say that the success of a film is undoubtedly influenced by the style, the delivery skills, and experience of the director. So they're responsible for many aspects of the filmmaking process. They must interpret the script and transport the audience into an effective storytelling medium. That includes both an outstanding visual medium and also cinematic sound experience that reaches the heart of the viewers. So they're responsible for guiding the actor's performance and often communicating that vision to the film and technical crew to achieve the desired results to fulfill the creative vision. And a director, as a lot of us know, will and can make very important decisions relating to these creative aspects of filmmaking that can define the success of a film. So in most cases, for a director to be a success, they must have a vast knowledge of the filmmaking process. While it is often the director that will receive great acclaim if the film is a success, it's also that same individual who will receive the criticism if the film doesn't do well. So the director's job is undoubtedly a very difficult one. But some directors have been known to be successful, to become icons in the business, and names that we all know, and such as Stanley Kubrick, Martin Scorsese, Steven Spielberg, just to name a few. So today we have that important conversation about how an experienced and effective sound mixer establishes open communication with a film director to help support them in achieving their goal of creating the creative landscape, which can foster that successful film. And nothing tells more about wisdom and experience than experience. So that is why I'm very pleased and very excited to introduce today's guest. So today we have this specific conversation about communication with directors with Mr. Whit Norris. Whit has worked with directors such as Ron Howard, Adam McKay, Todd Phillips, Seth Gordon, Kevin Smith, Justin Lin, Peter Berg, Drew Barrymore, and Ridley Scott. He has worked from the days of recording on analog tape to now recording on state-of-the-art digital recorders. Some of his credits include Bad Boys for Life, Godzilla of the Monsters, Fate of the Furious, Ant-Man, Anchorman 2, Game Night, Hangover 3, ID Theft, Fast 5, Whip It, Dogma, Jay and Silent Bob, Strike Back, The Crazies, and Friday Night Lights. He is a member of the Cinema Audio Society, the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers, and IATSE Local 695 of Los Angeles, and IATSE 479 of Georgia, where he serves as the vice president of the union. Whit, how are you today, sir?
Hey, good afternoon, Michael.
Thank you for being here, and I'm very excited to talk with you today, Whit, about what we are focused on. And first, is everything good over with you guys right now? And as far as family and all that, and how's social isolation going?
It's challenging, but everything's good. Nothing to complain about.
Yeah, great. Well, so let's go ahead and just jump right into it here. And let's see, get to the first conversation or the first note here as I close my application that has my notes in it that I need to open up. And let's see here, notes. Okay, so, all right, so let's get right into it. So what,
Mm-hmm.
let's start with your chronological process on a feature film, and you're working with a director that you haven't worked with in the past. I'd imagine on a feature film, your initial contact with the director is your interview. Talk to me about these initial conversations and what your objectives are when first meeting the director. Is it mostly a fact-finding process, or do you have the opportunity typically to read the scripts beforehand on these type of projects and have conversations with the director about the vision for this project? Tell me about that process and how that typically goes for you.
Yes, Michael. Generally, I have read the script by the time I'm talking or interviewing with the director, and it varies on project to project, Michael. Sometimes I'm hired by the line producer or executive producer, and the director trusts them to, put together a crew for them, including the sound department. But then there is, even after that point, I still make an effort to go and meet the director and have a sit down because I've studied the script now, probably have read it 3 times, have made various notes, things that I would like to, discuss with the director on what his vision is or her vision is for doing it. Um, Also, I just want to get to know the director as a person, having, conversations about film, life, family, just to get a little feel for them and what's important in their life as you develop a working relationship with them.
Yeah, and do you find with that typically that those conversations are varying with the director depending upon at what point that you're meeting them? So, is the conversation different for you in the interview process if you're interviewing directly with the director versus one where you're already brought onto the film after the fact?
Generally not. I mean, Michael, I can recall three times in recent years where I went to meet with the director, whether it was for the interview or to get his. Um, I was not hired until they had his approval
Mm-hmm.
exactly, but there were 3 interviews, I guess you could say, or 3 meetings with 3 different directors over recent years where we never even talked about sound.
Mm.
I mean, just we're getting to know each other. Sound wasn't even brought up, or if it was brought up, it was very little. But it was just getting to know the person, and they were obviously wanting to to know me.
Yeah, and do you find with that's I mean, when you think about any relationship that you establish on, in a film, whether it be with other crew members or other department heads, that's a very good point. So you find, if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying really is kind of getting to know, obviously, the director as an individual
Mhm.
a little bit is essential before you start getting into the business aspect of that.
Yeah, yeah, that's it exactly. Yeah, getting to know them as a person and then as the director. But obviously, those 3 times was really fascinating. That's the way the interview went, so to speak, of just getting to know each other versus uh, having any real deep discussions about sound. But then generally, there's a meeting that I'm going to follow up on later on where we're going to discuss some of the questions I have and want to see what some of the vision of the director is that we're going to bring and tell in the story
Yeah,
that's that's sound related.
yeah, because it seems to me, and what you're speaking of, obviously, when you wouldn't be sitting in the chair with the in the office interviewing with the director or having that meeting without they already know your experience, they've seen your resume,
Yeah,
you were actually
yeah.
brought on. Probably, how often do you find that you're actually being brought onto the project by previous relationships and by someone recommending you and them knowing you from another project?
That is generally always the truth, Michael. It's always about relationships. It's usually a producer I've worked with before, or I'm recommended to another producer or someone that I know, in the industry or that knows that we know each other, and they finally, have the opportunity to bring me on one of their projects. But it's generally, I don't think I've ever been hired, so to speak, as a cold call. without knowing someone on that production that wanted me on board.
That makes a lot of sense, Whit. And, and moving a little further into that, I know a majority of your resume, and looking at your recent credits and what you've done over the years is mostly feature film. But I know you've also done a lot of narrative TV series type productions. Since I work in this world a lot myself, I know a lot of my personal experiences that I don't get the opportunity to typically meet with the director, usually until the tech scout. And talk to me about some of the proactive steps that you've taken in your experience when you haven't had the opportunity to interview or meet the director and you're coming in basically cold to meeting that director the first time on a tech scout.
Well, a lot of times when it was episodic television, we didn't even have a tech scout, Michael. So I'm meeting the director literally maybe a day or two before their episode. That maybe they come by the set to visit, and you try to step out, and somebody, oh well, that's the director for the next episode. So you try to take an effort to go out and at least shake their hand and introduce yourself to them. But generally on the TV shows, we didn't do any tech scouting, or maybe on a pilot, but that would have been it. But you always want to go over and introduce yourself, and may not remember your name the day they come to the set to start shooting, but you can introduce yourself again.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And if in my experience in moving on a lot of these productions in television, is sometimes I'll have the opportunity to go on the tech scouts for the first block or first couple of
Right, right.
episodes, and then I'm able to meet those relationships in the other department heads while on the tech scout and start establishing those type of relationships, and also to meet the director. But to your point is that, yeah, once you are already on the production, and if it is a TV production, a lot of the times I've had it where I couldn't even make the production meetings. I had someone
Yeah.
sending me notes because we're continuously shooting through that sort of process. So, so moving forward here with,
Well, one thing,
yep,
one
go
thing I
ahead.
want to bring up, Michael, since we brought up the idea of scouting and being on the scouts, I think that scouting is one of the most important things where you start your relationship, not just with the director, but with a lot of the department heads and crew. That's another reason I think scouting is so important, not just to go and figure out all the logistics, but starting your relationships with other people on the production. Because I don't know, it's something I always go back to. Great sound is not done by three people. It takes you getting a whole crew on board and their support to help tell the story and protect the performance and get great sound.
Yeah. And and we have a range of different types of viewers on the channel with as well as obviously a majority and a lot of the channel are production sound mixers and people working in the business, but we also have students who watch the channel and different types of crafts. And I think it's important to distinguish also that the difference, a tech scout itself where you go see the locations is not the location scout.
Right.
So really, we're coming into the environment where we're having to already see what has been selected with very or almost no chance of changing. When you see something on a tech scout and speaking of how you would relate with a director that might be an issue, what's your process typically on communicating that type of thing to a director or other department heads?
Um, generally, um, generally they're not going to change any location if I was not happy with it. So basically, what we try to do is try to figure out how to deal with the situation that's there. What can we fix? If we're out in an open field, what are we going to do with the generators? Do we need to bring in some bales of hay to block the jennies? Or if we're shooting near a lake or pond and at night, it's really challenging with generators. If you're in a flight pattern, that's one thing. There's not a lot you can do about that except deal with that on the day. But you try to prepare as much as you can, making sure that at certain locations, certain buildings, that you have, control over elevators, heating and air, that type of thing. Also, a big thing is making sure that they can get permits for ITC, so you can control traffic. But you, anyway, just go through your checklist when you get there the day. I'm sorry, I'm not being very clear on this, Michael, but um, generally, I'm not going to on a tech scout unless it's something very serious. I'm probably not going to discuss it with the director.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Director's focused on what he or she is doing at the time with the tech scout, and working with the crew on what's going to be done. But I'm going to go to the departments that would deal with it. I would go to locations about having ITC for traffic, and I would check with locations on other issues. Check with the rigging gaffer and the rigging best boy, um, and about their thoughts on generator placement and things like that.
And
That's not something I have to go to a director about, but I'm there listening to what the director's vision is
mm-hmm.
for that day we're going to be there and shooting, and what his or her vision is.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gathering a lot from them on that standpoint.
Mm-hmm. That's excellent, Whit. And in your 30 plus years experience as a production sound mixer, have you found that there is an underlying element that all directors are looking for from you as a production sound mixer? Is there a one size fits all approach as far as dealing with different personalities, or how adaptable do you typically need to be from project to project when managing and working with these relationships?
Michael, there's definitely no one size fits all. Every director is different. Some directors are more sound friendly than others. Then there's some directors that are very focused on the performance and the spoken word. They want to make sure that they capture it, and they don't have to ADR anything. But there's a whole there's I mean I don't there's as many personalities as there are directors, and how they approach sound and the craft.
And in how much flexibility with, like, I guess to rephrase the question, is there an element of listening or a flexibility? Like, at what point are you, when you establish that working relationship with the director, are you saying, okay, it's going to be like this when communicating with his director, so these are the methods that we should use? Or he likes or she likes to be emailed through the assistant first and heads up? And how proactive do you find that you typically need to be when communicating something?
I mean, I'm going to speak to the director themselves. I mean, straightforward. It's not going to be an email generally, because when I'm working with them, I'm on the set. But if it's something that the assistant would handle for the director, then I would obviously go through them for that. But checking about playback or anything that's out of the norm for the day, I would, if it was something. I mean, generally, I'm always going to approach the director straight on if I have a question about something that only they can answer. And there's sometimes you can go to a first AD and they cannot even answer your question; that it has to go to the director.
Yeah, yeah. And
Did that answer your question, Michael?
Well, absolutely. I think one of the things that's interesting to me when I hear you speak to that is one of the differences as far as having that direct line of communication. Because I think in me, when I'm relating to it, a lot of the shows that I do in TV have been heavy music shows. And when
Yeah.
we're moving from different directors on each episode, or every other episode changing directors, oftentimes the only mode of communication I can have is an email to the assistant to get that line of communication going. Because you're currently focused on the director you're working with on that one episode, right, and getting through that. So it does answer the question, because it's interesting to me, all of just the different approaches and techniques that you use depending upon the particular production.
Well, and sometimes it's also the personality.
Yeah, and how often, how much of the personality of the director do you feel really influences your ability to be able to work with that director on a film? And how much, really, a better way to ask that question is, how much adjustments does it really take from your day in and day out process dealing with different types of personalities on a film set with directors?
It's the director it's a big deal, Michael, because I've worked with one director who didn't want to hear about sound. He didn't want to hear about it. He didn't want to see us. Could have cared less. And I even warned one of my colleagues who did a film with him later on. I said, "Look, he doesn't care. Doesn't want to hear about it. Doesn't want to see you." So what you do then, you learn how to work around the director since you cannot work with them. That's a highly unusual thing. That's really only happened for the most part one time major in my career. But there are some that are out there that they do not look at us as part of the, as I'm going to quote my friend Mark Ulano, we're part of the orchestra that tells the story, that creates the story, and they don't want to treat us as one of the players. They don't want to hear us. So anyway, but overall, I'm sorry, Michael, you're going to have to restate your question. I started going down another road
No,
here.
that actually what you're saying makes perfect sense. And and one of the things that I did hear you say is that you find that it's more the case that you're finding directors workable with the
Yeah.
sound department, and I think a lot of that speaks to your experience and approach. And because I think I have found in my own experience that directors, even on a tech scout, to say things, and they were half joking, half not, saying, "You're going to hate me." Uh,
Yeah. 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 I've heard that.
yeah, with a smile on their face. And I just smiled back. I said, well, why is that? And he's like, well, I want everybody wired and this and this. Well, that's no problem. We're happy to do that. And speaking to what you said earlier about oftentimes you're meeting that director sometimes on day one. And
Yeah. On top. Yeah.
And in TV, this is also the case. And I found, recently that sometimes this approach of just not knowing what you're walking into is really just this how can we be most helpful to you approach. Typically we have our thirds, we'll hand out contacts and stuff like that. But if it's day one, like you said, going and reaching out and handing the director the contact personally, and then I'd have my boom op by my side for each block and say, well, this is my boom op here, and I'm Michael, I'm the mixer, and we are here to make things easy for you. And please let me know anything I can do to be helpful. It's almost like, sometimes I felt like I was waiting tables, and I think, even if things weren't going well on that day, I mean, how much do you find, Whit, and to further on the question, do you find that you're needing to bite your tongue, or you're needing to just kind of, how do you pick your battles, Whit? How do you decide typically what matters and what doesn't matter, and how much of the personality of the director that you're working with determines that threshold?
Well, Michael, you have to look at the big picture sometimes. We know what can be fixed and what cannot be fixed with all the amazing tools that are in post production these days, between Isotope and other noise reduction software. So I know what can be fixed. You've got to keep in mind, I think, about your schedule. Is this director making their day?
Mm-hmm.
Are we running behind? That type of thing. But sometimes looking at that is going to decide whether I'm going to approach them about something. A lot of times I can get a lot of things fixed by just working with the first AD or the boom operator working with the first AD. If it's something immediate on the set that affected the performance, or some noise or something that we can fix, there's no reason to go to the director about that. Now, a lot of times I will caution a director. Sometimes people have accents that slip or certain words that slip, and I generally always want them to be aware of that. Um, sometimes you'll have an actor or actress from the UK or even Australia that is playing in an American part, and sometimes a word or two will slip. And if the director doesn't catch it, I would try to make sure somebody on my team that we let them know, because that's going to affect the performance, which is something that the director is usually more concerned about instead of the dolly that squeaked on a take or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, which is something I would fix with them. But also the dolly that can be cleaned out
Mm-hmm.
very easily. I'm generally looking for things that affected performance, that where they would have to replace the lines.
Mm-hmm.
That's the issues that I'm generally going to be concerned about.
Yeah. And and really what I hear you saying, Whit, and what I really appreciate of your answer is that one of the things that I hear you saying and defining is that really having a strong understanding what needs to go through the first AD,
Right.
what
Hmm.
needs to go through the boom op, and what is a director thing, and that fine line that you defined there when you started speaking of dialect was the creativity, the creative, which really is interesting because me and you were having a phone conversation the other day, and you struck a chord in me, and I'm going to let you speak to that, but really talked about when we need something that involves a director, meaning that the director is going to advocate for the sound mixer to get something done, because as we all know, the first ads, they want to make their day.
Yeah.
And the fact is sometimes I found in my experience that the director can advocate in a way that can get us something we need, that would make the first go, okay, well, we'll do that. And tell me about how the difference of you spoke to the how to approach the language
Oh yes.
of a
Yeah.
director, and let us know about that because that was really interesting.
Yeah, and this is something that has came from other mixers too. But a lot of times, it seems like these days, when you say there's a sound problem that or there's a sound issue, it brings a certain negativity to the conversation. Um, People, seem to go, ah, sound, ah. But and so what I think is important to do sometimes is let's talk about the performance. That there was a
Mm-hmm.
performance issue there, because you don't have to say because there was a sound issue there, but there was something that affected the performance. That was one thing recently with Ron Howard and his team was always about having the crew create an environment for the actors to give their best performance. We didn't ever want to do anything to interrupt a performance, and that was his total focus. But I think if we start using terms like performance instead of sometimes sound, that I think people might pay attention a little more, because it just seems like when we're using the word sound, it's a sound issue that just everybody goes, they get upset. At least I've noticed that over the years. I'm sure other mixers have too. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And and when you spoke about that, it just really struck a chord in me because, I've seen a lot of conversation from especially very experienced sound mixers and post mixers like yourself talking about the importance of taking responsibility with the being proactive with that director and as a creative role, because one of the things that I hear often from yourself and a lot of sound people in the computer in the community, also in the computer with the pandemic, but is that we're filmmakers first and sound mixers
Yes,
second. What do you think about that, Whit?
absolutely. Uh, I, we're part of the director's team. We're part of the producer's team to help tell the story. Um, I've always thought, I mean, Even a drummer is considered a member of the band. Maybe we're all the drummer. We're the drummer for the band or for the orchestra. But yeah, absolutely. I there. Um, I think there's an old joke. What do you call a guy who hangs out with filmmakers? A sound person. What do you call a guy who hangs out with musicians? A drummer.
Yeah.
But no, but that's the old joke. But yeah, absolutely, we're filmmakers. I mean, it's part. We're breaking down the story. We are gathering, and hopefully, we're getting everything we need. And it's not what we need; it's what the director needs. But yeah, we're there helping. The boom operator, the sound utility. We're all there helping tell the story. So yes, absolutely, we're filmmakers, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to remember that, and especially when we're approaching other departments, as far as knowing what their roles are, what their responsibilities are, and becoming, experts in the craft of filmmaking, not just in our role, but having an understanding of all the roles. Because, I think that same type of filmmaking language that you're talking about and adapting to, naming or knowing, some of the names of the instruments of the director of photography, or being able to speak the language is critical, because I think it says something to them that you actually care, that you actually know something about their craft. I think is what can precipitate that respect that we're often looking for, because sometimes you do hear a lot from, it's a known sound. Well, this, they're not letting me do this for sound, or I can't get this, or this director's not workable, or this is, and a lot of it is that there are certain elements that are in our control, and things that we can do as production sound mixers to betterment ourselves and how we're approaching these different roles, especially this director role, to help be a part of that process. So a question is with how much of being an effective communicator with a director on a film set has an effect as how the film industry sees us as a whole?
That's a great question, Michael. I'm not sure how to answer that. Help me out here.
Well,
I mean,
yep.
if they see us interacting with the director, I think that's going to bring up a level of respect for the craft.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I would go with it. When people see you working with the director, that's got to
Mm-hmm.
and interacting. That's got to do nothing but raise a level of respect for the craft and for yourself.
Absolutely, and I think, like you're talking about, there's that immediate result. Like, if the director is one of these sound friendly, as we can call it, or let's just say that sound has developed the proper relationship with the director, in which that the director has a question for the sound mixer, or it's like, hey, did we get that, or I want to talk to you about this music thing we're doing, and approach and get a sense of how we do that technically, so they can get that vision. That you're absolutely right. But that director moving forward onto future projects, how does that affect their vision of sound mixers moving forward, was more of the question. Like, have you ever had a director say to you, wow, I've never had a sound mixer ask me that before. That's really great.
I've run across some things like that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I think you're talking about as far as shaping a director's opinion of the sound department. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. All right, Whit, so let's see here. As when I pause here, it's me trying to navigate, multitask a switcher here. So thanks for bearing in with me, guys. So I know many of us here that work as sound mixers could tell a million stories about directors that we've worked with, or specific situations. Is there something that comes to mind that stands out to you in your career, that was a moment when you realized that you had broken through a barrier as far as understanding the dynamics of communication between you and the director?
Um, I don't know if there's one incident that really does that. I think I had a really good relationship years ago with Kevin Smith and all the Kevin Smith movies that we did, and I kind of became somewhat spoiled because he was a director that really cared about sound. Since he was a writer, he was all about the spoken word, and he wanted the words, the performances done correctly and this and that. I mean, and his theory was, well, if there was a boom shadow, we'll turn the light off then, you know. But he was a did not want to ADR, and I kind of got used to that attitude of somebody that cared about sound, and they kind of as I got more out into, I guess, the working with other directors. Well, not every director is a Kevin Smith,
Mm-hmm.
that has a passion for the dialogue.
That's great. And and speaking of the other side, and without naming any names, of course, uh,
Okay.
what about directors who are simply not sound friendly? And how much have you found that out there, that you came across a director that is not willing to work with you to get what you need, and and more importantly, how do you know what to do with that relationship, as far as, how do you keep the communication lines open with a director who's just not willing to work with sound in a level that you would like typically out of a director?
Well, at that point, you just you're professional. Good morning, good evening, how's it going, whatever. But generally, I'm going to start working with the crew to work around the director. If they don't want to deal with sound, then that's when you start working with the first AD, and you start working with other departments to help solve those issues. And you just work around the director is what I've generally done.
And have you found in a situation where you needed to do that, that because of your approach not being pushy, as far as getting what you want, had that relationship with that director change?
No, but when I went to the re-recording stage, I got a big thumbs up after we played a reel from the director. But this is a guy that didn't want to see me on the set, really. But so I guess he realized, we did do a good job, without his support, I guess is what you would say. Um, but you just learn how to. I just learned how to quickly work around them. Am I going to change their mind? I doubt it.
Yeah.
They're set in their ways. They've done a lot of movies or whatever, and that's how they choose to work. I'm not going to be the person that changes their mind or opinion on it.
Yeah, and I love how that approach really speaks to the amount of wisdom and experience that you bring to the craft, of just knowing that, if someone is has a certain way of working, or their process is in a certain way, making an attempt to try to shift that is not going to be productive. And
And then one thing I wanted to back up that you said, that it's about what we need. No, we're there for them. It's about what
mm-hmm.
they need.
Yeah.
It's their dialogue. It's the director's dialogue. It's not my dialogue, but I'm trying to make sure I get what he needs or she needs for later.
And that's an excellent point, Whit. And I'm sure even communicating in that language in a way is also another effective way to communicate with directors as a whole. And I have to ask, Whit, is there any favorite directors that you've had, that you've worked with? And what project was that? And what was your most memorable experience working with a director?
Well, you know what? Just about all the directors I've worked with, I could just go through the list, but Kevin Smith was a great one to work with. Recently, Ron Howard, that was a great. The performances that we recorded on this project that I assume will be out this fall or the end of the year on Netflix, between Glenn Close and Amy Adams, were just incredible. Um, uh, it was, of course, working on all the Fast and Furiouses with the various directors. That's been a lot of fun. Um, I mean, Justin Lin was great. Um, uh, yeah, Anchorman 2 was great. Adam McKay was just a fun person to work with. We got him hooked on the VOG on that show. He realized that we could put a speaker on the set and he could throw one-liners out there for the guys to try, and he could direct because he could with video assist he couldn't always be right there on the set, and he just loved that. He had never used that before, and that was really changing for him. And but anyway, there's a lot of different projects, a lot of different directors I'm sure I'm forgetting about right now. Our directors that were on Bad Boys for Life, it was a team. They were some of the just generally down to earth great people. I mean, they were they were from Europe, and basically they were big on hugs. They gave everybody hugs in the morning when they came in. They were genuinely happy to be there. Brought a lot of positive things to the set, so that they were quite the team to work with.
And which project was did you work on that was Ron Howard when you worked with him, Whit?
It's called a Hillbilly Eulogy.
Okay, very cool. So Whit, before we go into the Q&A, is there anything that you'd like to add for us as far as tips or guidelines from your experience about communication with directors or communication in general on a film set?
I'm just going to say what I said earlier. To get great sound on a film set is not three people. It's getting everyone on your side and on your team and their support. But I'm going to just throw that out there again. That's what I truly believe.
That's great, Whit. And I want to say it was you who I learned that from. So thank you, because, that's one of the things that definitely has stuck with me. And I think there was a time, I think early in my career in production sound mixing, where I thought, well, if you want great production sound, you need a good production sound mixer with great gear, which is true. But really, a lot of these indie or low budget productions can really suffer from sound because things are as a whole may not be working. There could be compromises as far as locations and things like that really help determine what those results are. So thank you for that. So I think we're going to move to some Q&A if you're ready for that, Whit. I think we got some questions here, and we'll move right to that. And so we got a lot of hellos and everyone. Alejandro Reyes, thank you for being here, and thanks for your comment. And Andre Monterio, hello, Michael, hello, Andre, how are you? Thank you for being here. And we also have Mr. Slaney with us. Hello, everyone. Hey, Jake, how are you? Thank you for being here. We know Jake, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We know Jake.
So let me go to a split screen here. There we go. Vinod Subramian, and I apologize, Vinod, for not pronouncing that correctly, the last name. Hello, Whit. Hope Kathy and you are fine. Also, the kiddos.
Thanks, Vin.
Yeah, he's on our Zoom group, right, Whit? Or on the he's been on. Yeah. Thank you for being here, Vinod, and commenting. Okay, and then some talk about let's see here, safety guidelines, and so ATA A18. So I think this is important we clear this up with, because there was an email that went out from the document, the well-known leaked document that basically explains, and I'll let you explain it, that these are not the final intentions in first draft. Can you speak to that as far as workflows?
That was the document that came out of Lionsgate, and basically Vice President Mike Miller contacted Lionsgate about it, and this was a document that was leaked out. It was a first draft, and carries no weight whatsoever of there being a one-person sound team on a production. I don't think that's going to happen, but it was somebody's first draft. There's a lot of stuff that's going on right now. 695 has a committee that I'm on that's exploring this papers, because we think a lot of the producers and people, we think we know our jobs better than anyone else. So I think it's up to us to write what the standards and practices are going to be. So that's taking place right now. And then there's still, for our safety and health issues, there's going to have to be a meeting between the IATSE, at least here in North America, and the producers that we generally have our negotiations and things with AMPT. But that people are going to have to sit down and decide what the safety standards are going to be, and decide, because we're talking about people's health and welfare at this point, and nobody wants to go into a work environment that's not going to be safe.
Yeah, and thank you for speaking to that, Whit, because not everyone is able to get those sort of emails for our non-union friends, and the fact that we have a board in place, because Whit is the vice president of our local 479, who is the head of health and welfare for us, and they've been doing an amazing job. So thank you for that service. And and I saw that document too, and it didn't add up when I saw it. So it looks like we have Mr. Flip saying, "Who said?" Which I think was replying to, "Hey Flip, thank you for being here, sir." To that comment. So all right, and then they go on to say who, and then we'll move on here. A lot of conversation about that. Okay. Here we go. Scrolling through here. Really, guys, you could about. Oh wow. Okay, there we go. All right, moving here. All right, so we're going to stick, guys, to the questions about on topic here and move through. Companies will try something that did well as a with it. That is obvious. Okay, here we go. Yikes. Okay, here we go. So we have a question from JBoo707 that says, Michael, do you talk to the sound supervisor or post and warn them that there are things you're not able to control on set, i.e. a director that doesn't want to deal with you? So let me read it again, Whit, and I'll let you answer this. Do you talk to the sound supervisor or post and warn them that there are going to be things out of the control that the director is not willing to adjust for?
Absolutely. Anytime there's any issues, whether it's something with the director or anytime there's anything that's affecting the performance, or that's any noise issues or whatnot, I'm always sending an email to usually the picture editor and the assistant editors to give them a heads up about it. If there is a sound team on board, I would absolutely be emailing them, but a lot of times they're not on board yet. If you're on a series, they would be, but I absolutely and will also put things in my notes. But the more people have a heads up when there's an issue, or there's an issue that even the director's causing, that they're able to adjust for it instead of being surprised.
Yeah, and JB, that's an excellent question. And Whit, you bring up a great point, and both of you guys, is that this communication is also critical in post and all the way through, because a lot of times if those conversations are not had, then it can lead to trouble to you down the road, as far as, because sometimes there's not an understanding why something, and being clear with that, and you said, so Whit, do you find that a lot of, even on features, the post team is sometimes not on board when you, with the audio post team, excuse me, when you start principal photography?
Yes, sound post. Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of times.
Yeah.
Sometimes they know who it will be, or they will have a sound supervisor on, but they're not they're working on another project at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. All right. So, John Gooch says, be well, Vinod. Hello, John. Thank you for being here. Flip has a question, and it says, Flip, all right, it is, what's the best way to educate yourself on how easy something can be fixed? And I think he's talking about when we were talking about when you're speaking about what can be fixed in post and so forth. Yeah.
I would think there's probably some videos out from some of our manufacturers that create some of the software. You ought to see what they show examples of it. I think that's one thing. Also, experience is another thing, which is something you don't get. But I think you can learn from Who are some of the other noise reduction software? Cedar, I know, has some
Yep.
videos out.
Yep.
Um,
Isotope and Cedar are the two that I know mostly about.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm sure there's YouTube, and I'm sure there's videos on their websites of showing
Mm-hmm.
what they can fix.
Yeah.
Which that's a great way to start, at least, and also reaching out to re-recording mixers and sound supervisors and dialogue editors. They can tell you what they can fix and what they cannot.
Yeah.
I know one of the seminars we've had recently or last year at our local, and then also we have had one on the LA Zoom group, is water. Water is very challenging, whether it be a fountain, whether it be a river, or even the ocean. That's one thing that they have issues fixing. I know cicadas are, because they change their frequency and pitch so much, they're challenging to take out. Crickets are much easier. But this, just listening to
Interesting.
these guys talk. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's great question too, Flip. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. ATA A18. See, on YouTube, you can use the guys' names, which is great. What to do if the director tells me, "Don't worry about the sound. We will get wild lines after the take."
I think that's a great solution. Absolutely, to record the lines right there on the set. Yes, you know. Let me tell you, talking with the dialogue editors and everything, they love that. If you have a sound issue, if you can get it wild, get it right there on the day in the right environment, do it. And that's why the actors can still remember how they did the performance, which I think that's a great thing. My issue has been with some directors due to time and schedule, and I'm wanting to do wild lines. If I Lately, I've been pretty fortunate with that they would do it if I suggested it, but I wasn't doing it that often, and they would know when if I spoke up, they know I needed it or they needed it. So anyway.
And do you have one question I have with that I wanted to ask that relates to this is, do you have a direct communication line via an IFB system to the director on
No,
set?
no,
Okay.
no, I do not.
Okay.
Sometimes it's the first AD.
Okay. Got it. That's great. Thank you.
I toss it up. I toss it up to them, and then they, toss it to the director.
Okay, great.
Sometimes it's hard to get to the director.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
And in my experience, I also, usually it seems like there's a very small window to get those wild lines, and
Yes.
negotiating that fast, which is why I asked the calm question. He's like, "Hey, can we get a wild line?" Especially if you're still rolling. Do you typically like to re-roll for those, or do you continue to roll, make the request, and hope to get it at the end of that take?
No, I would re-roll,
Okay,
so I can label it as a proper wild track.
Yep. Great. Thank you for that question, ATA18. So we got another question, Whit, from David Garcia. And he asked, how do you negotiate when working on an action scene which involves special effects that can compromise sound quality?
Generally on an action scene, you're going to be able to at least get a close-up out of it at some point, and where hopefully you're not having to run all the effects. But usually on those scenes, it's about the wider stuff. That's when all the effects are going on. But hopefully you can get a tight shot without all the effects. That's what I usually try to ask for, is, if we can turn down the fans or turn down whatever effect is going on, to turn it off when we get close.
Now, does that
or to dial some of it down to where it's workable? I mean, another one of my slogans is, it's all about signal to noise. If I can get the actors louder than the noise, it's generally going to be, you can save the performance.
And when you get to that coverage shot, talk about, for those who don't know about the process of doing that, does it start with the VFX supervisor on set, if you have a VFX on set, and then go through other pathways, or is it the first, or what's your typical pathway for navigating that request when you?
That's going to be through the first AD and the director to begin with, and then we get those guys on board. But first, I've got to get people to agree to do a tighter shot where all the effects aren't needed.
Okay.
and that's generally going to be the director and the DP possibly.
Yeah.
But to get those guys on board, then we get everyone else on board.
And Whit, are you sometimes, depending upon the dynamics of the communication with the director, is that protocol sometimes I'm going to make the request to the first so they then can make that request to the director, since those two relationships are so,
No, generally, if I can get to the director and have the conversation, that's what I'm going to ask for.
okay,
I'm going to go
just
to the
directly.
director
Yeah.
directly if I can get to him. Hey, it would be a great idea. If we just did a couple singles tight without all all the effects, or then the other option is to get it wild without all the machines and noise on.
Mm-hmm.
So you always have that option too.
And it's interesting, Whit, because when I hear you talk about these things in request, there's just this ease about it. Well, we'll just make the request here, but I find in my own experience on set, is that there was a huge learning process as far as me understanding timing, how to ask, what language to use, because like you say, in the pressure of the moment when they're trying to make their day and they're focused on one thing and you're thinking the other, the dynamics of that conversation are huge to be able to make those requests. So, sorry. So we have more questions here. This is Alejandro. Alejandro is a regular on this channel. Thank you for being here, Alejandro. And he has a question for you. He says, how do you work around a generator when it's a urban setting and ADR isn't an option for post? So the question is how do you work around a generator when it's in an urban setting and ADR isn't an option for post?
Well, they should have got more cable to get the generator farther away.
Yeah.
I mean, we have built we've built baffles in the past or whatever, but the whole idea is getting the generator put in the first spot, the correct spot to begin with. In a urban setting, they should have gotten 100 more feet of cable and put it farther away. When we've been in, but that would be. But it's hard to have a generator moved in the middle of the day or at the beginning of the day. It's about getting it right, which goes back to pre-production and scouting, or talking with your other fellow crew members about how they can fix this.
That's right. Paying attention to the location. Are we going to have power? You can communicate, Alejandro, with the Best Boy Electric. If there is no Best Boy, Alejandro does a lot of mid-size projects and stuff with, and getting, if it's the gaffer, directly with the gaffer, and if it's an even smaller project, the G&E person. It just depends how small you're going, and saying, hey, how much cable do you have for the Jenny? And, oh, well, we've got 50 feet. Anyway, we could get an extra 100 feet for that. What do because make that advanced request, I'm sure, is huge, like you speak about, Whit, and pre-production and all of that is great question, Alejandro. Thank you for asking that. And
but one thing to remember, Michael, cable is cheap when it comes to generators.
Yep.
Cable is cheap.
That's right.
You're not asking to put on an extra person or whatever. You're just asking for another 100 feet of cable. Usually will solve your problems.
And time is not. Having to, if you're on the day and it's already rigged and you're shooting, I mean, wouldn't you say don't even make the request, because that thing is done unless you think you can get away with it.
We've moved some generators.
Yeah.
It does happen once in a while.
Okay.
It does happen.
That's great. So Flip comments here. Tell them to move the generator.
Yeah.
Thank you for keeping it simple, Flip. There.
Yes.
Yeah.
But usually when we've had them move generators, and that's even happened recently, is you work it out. You've got to get the DP on board, the gaffer on board. They've got to power down the set. Get it all ready, so it all happens very quickly, so nobody's losing any time. But it can be done. And it still gets done every once in a while when needed.
That's right. Like on a turnaround or something. But it could be tricky if they're lighting. That's the other thing, right? So, Mr. Cujo, thank you for being here. Cujo Cooley, howdy y'all. Great to see you. Thank you for being here, Cujo. And Kevin sound. Is Karachi on here? Yes. He just
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
okay, hey,
Okay,
Kevin,
yeah.
thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Hi, Michael. Great topic. Really enjoying the conversation. Thank you, Kevin. And then he says, it's Kevin at Karachi. So that's great. All right. So Kevin is Whit's boom op, for those of you who don't know that.
Yeah.
How long has he been your primary boom op right now, Whit?
We've been doing it about a year and a half, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. So ATA 18 says, thank you for the information. Okay. John Gooch has a question. It says, wide and tight coverage conversations. At what point do you have that discussion, or do you have that direction early on with the director?
Yes, it's something we still battle, something I still battle. We try to talk about it in pre-production. But that's something that we still battle even now, because it goes back to the schedule. To are you? Okay, I'm. Can you hear me, Michael?
Yeah, we can hear you. It was just
okay.
a thing for a second, but you're back. You're good.
Okay. But yeah, it's challenging with that, because sometimes with the schedule and making the day, people want to get caught up in shooting wide and tight. But yeah, I do try to have that conversation, and sometimes we win, sometimes we don't.
How much is DP versus director on that conversation with?
Generally, director. DP would rather shoot it. Would rather light the singles, and light for them most of the time, instead of lighting for a wide and tight.
Yeah. Great input. And Flip says, thanks. Thank you, Flip. Okay. So another question here. Alejandro, is there a situation where you needed to use something like a cedar device? Forgive me if I can't remember the name, but I'm contemplating the idea of investing in one.
Well, here's the thing. If you're going to invest in that, are you telling me that the projects you do don't have proper post-production? Because the thing about it is, if you're going to use the cedar, the way to use it is to put it as a bonus track. You still want to have your raw tracks there, your mix and everything else. If you want to put a bonus mix track on there that you ran through some noise reduction, then fine. And also, a cedar will kind of also show you what can be fixed. But the portable cedar box that's out is not a true noise reduction the way some of the other software is, because the cedar, basically you can take out hums and buzzes and some things like that, but you're not going to be notching out trains or airplanes or anything like that with that portable cedar box.
Yeah, and to add to that, Whit, I mean, so much of our job as production sound mixers is listening. It's assessing all the way from pre-production to onset what's going on, what needs to be turned off, how are we doing, what are we getting.
Yeah.
And they have these, Alejandro, these powerful tools in post. And I think this Cedar DNS2 is a powerful tool, but I think it's one that can be misunderstood if, especially depending upon the workflow. Like if a live application, I could see that being great, or something where, but with our interest of delivering the best raw, unprocessed tracks, because when you do process these tracks, there is a degradation of sound. Every single thing you do to a dialogue track as far as processing takes that notch down just one more. And so thank you, Alejandro. Flip answers Cedar DNS2 is the model of that.
Yes.
And, this is a good question, Whit. Like we said, we have a wide range of sound people on the channel. JBoo707 says, how does someone get into the union and what does that journey look like?
Well, it's going to depend on what part of the country you're in. Um, there's going to be some different requirements, excuse me, from joining here in Georgia versus joining in New York or Los Angeles. So generally, you can go to any of the websites. IOTC 695 is LA, IOTC 479.org is Atlanta, and there is a application process generally on the website.
That's great. And guys, we're going to do just a couple or few more questions here and wrap it up just out of respect for Whit's time here. And be sure to put your comments also below on this video, and then we can also answer questions that way as well here for that kind of stuff. So we just got a few left too, Whit, so we'll go right through it. Cujo says, cable is way cheaper than ADR. Absolutely right.
Absolutely.
Great
Yes,
point. Great point, Cujo. And John Gooch says, wide and tight conversations. Oh, wait, we already did that one. Okay, never. Okay, Daniel Gribb, a really bright student here on the channel. Whoops, read the wrong time, thought it was 2. Guess it's recap time. Daniel, thank you for being here. And then I'm going to scroll through some of these last questions and see what we got time for when a film. How do we get a nice view? Oh, here's an interesting question. How we compromise, well, it's more of a comment. How we compromise to director when we have film, a lot of wide shot, how do we get a nice boom sound? So this is from Andre Ramadan. Let me repeat. How, and there's a lot of different viewers from different parts of the country with, so how do we compromise to the director when the film has a lot of wide and tights? How do we get the boom sound? And I think you answered that earlier on the VFX question with coverage, but I'll let you. I think what he's asking is, how do you get a nice boom sound when shooting a wide and tight?
Generally, you don't. What you're going to be doing is maybe mixing part of the boom in and pushing harder on the wires.
Mm-hmm.
But that's generally how we do it. And hopefully that'll work. And then again, always, if you've got costume issues or whatever, get it wild. That's really important, and try to negotiate for dropping a camera. If they're shooting wide and tight, it's another thing that we'll do is, okay, you've got the wide shot. You did take 1, take 2. Let's drop the wide and do just a take of the tight camera. Because that's where the coverage is going to be anyway, and most of the time, unless somebody's being creative and wanting to play a lot of wide shots.
And to your point earlier, Whit, when you said, hey, we'd really want to make sure we capture the performance on this one. Can we get an A only? Yeah. Versus
exactly.
that wasn't, and I'm learning from you. I mean, that wasn't good for sound. So can we get an A only?
Yeah.
Well, the answer's no, is to that question. Versus wait, that ear. So people just saying thank you and so forth. Thanks so much, Michael and Whit. Really appreciate
Thanks, everybody.
it. And Alejandro, he says, thanks for the clarification on the Cedar DNS2. And we did get through all the conversations. I just want to say thank you for everyone for being here, number one. And most importantly, Whit, thank you for your time and expertise. Whit really brings an incredible amount of expertise to our craft. And I can say from a personal and professional standpoint, I have learned so much from him as far as my own career path and, the importance of learning from the mentors and people who have walked in the path before you is so important to your own personal and professional growth. And so I think that's going to be all for us. And thank you so much for being here. And I'll look forward to seeing everyone on the next one.
Anyway, thanks, Michael. Thanks for all the kind words. Thanks, everybody.